All right. Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of our behavior streams. Today's stream is going to be a repeat of a previous stream that we did that YouTube pulled off the air. And we're still not quite sure why, so we might get pulled again, but we're moving some videos around so that hopefully the stream remains completely intact from beginning to end. We're going to go ahead and get right into our lecture here. We're really talking about behavior interventions, okay? And behavior interventions are what are the things that we do to change a child's behaviors. And in ABA, there's two basic processes, actually three, but around 2 to 3 basic processes, okay? One which is reinforcement, and the other ones are punishment and extinction. In applied behavior analysis, behaviors can go in one of two directions. Either can go up or go down, and those processes are either reinforcement when we increase a behavior, or punishment, or extinction when we're trying to get rid of a behavior. Reinforcement is about promoting behaviors, right? Like, oh, the things that we want to see more often. In contrast, punishment is about getting rid of behaviors, reducing those behaviors. So the most effective interventions are going to be ones that incorporate both. We're promoting specific behaviors and we're discouraging other behaviors. So what are the behaviors that we want to increase? Well, I think it's clear we want good, appropriate, pro-social behaviors. The behaviors we want to teach can vary wildly from one child to another, but there is a commonality to a lot of the skills that we teach, because most of our kids lack these skills, or they lack the expertise in these particular skills to function well in everyday life. So communicating via pointing was one of the skills that we talked about as being a very important skill. Why? Because if you don't have appropriate language to communicate your needs, and you don't know how to point to things to tell somebody else you want those things, your life is going to be incredibly frustrating, because there's no way for someone else to really know what it is that you want. And so then they default to crying and protesting as their main ways of communicating. Another skill that's a really vital skill that most people don't really recognize is the ability to imitate. The imitation skill is one of the most important skills to learn. And that the better you are at imitating somebody, the faster you're likely to learn. The poorer your imitation skills, the slower you're likely to learn. Here is an example of an imitation skill, and this has to do with fine motor movements, okay? And there are a lot of different types of imitation. There's big muscle movements, and there are small muscle movements, and this is showing the small muscle movements.
따라해. 그렇지. 잘했어. 따라해. 우와, 유진이 잘 따라했어. 유진아, 따라해. 우와, 최고. 잘했어. 유진아, 따라해. 우와, 잘 따라해야지. 우리 애들이 그래. 잘 따라했어. 앉아. 따라해. 그렇지. 잘했어.
All right. Another skill that we've shown before is the ability to wait. Okay, like, so yes, I told you what I want, but a lot of kids have an inability to wait for something that they now have told you that they want. So when we first teach waiting, sometimes we're only waiting for like telling the child to wait for 1 second before we give them the item. And as the child gets more and more successful, we're slowly increasing the amount of time they have to wait. And for most kids that I work with, I have them learn to wait for at least 15 minutes and sometimes up to half an hour. When we're teaching waiting, I never like to use timers. You know, some people like using time. I do not. Why? Because I want the child to understand that when I tell you to wait, you have to wait for an unspecified amount of time. And when I tell you you can have the item is when you can have the item. Another reason why I don't like to use timers is that when COVID's all over and you go to a restaurant, okay, and when you order food, you don't control how fast the food is going to come out to you. And so you want the child to be able to wait appropriately in those instances, because the time is not going to be very specific. You know, it's not as if, I set a timer for 5 minutes and at 5 minutes, the food is here already. You know, you just don't know. And so we're teaching the child to be able to handle this fluctuations in time, because they just know you told me to wait. I know I'm going to get the item. It's just I can't get it right now immediately. Now, one other thing before we watch the video, when I teach a child to wait for something, I always like to start with food. Why? Because you can get a lot of practice in. You don't have to give a lot of food. You can give like, a couple of small pieces of candy, small item that they really want, but they can consume it and then you can try it again. So you can get a lot of practice in with doing that. The food should be right in front of the child, open and available to them to grab if they wanted to. But the idea here is so that they are tempted at their highest level and they are learning how to control themselves, so that even though I can easily grab the food and try to put it in my mouth, I'm learning to restrain myself and to delay my gratification right now.
기다려. 잘했어, 먹어. 우! 우리 친구.
All right, now a lot of our kids have difficulty time losing. You know, like, so they hate to lose, okay, and they can cry and scream and engage in a whole variety of behaviors because of that. So we have to teach them how to be a good sport, because nobody likes playing with a bad sport. And so if they continue to have these level behaviors when they lose, they're going to have a hard time making friends.
하나 남았어. 지우야, 저도 울지 않고 잘 참으면 엄마가 마이구미 줄 거야. 아니야. 알았지? 자, 이거 하나는 안 우는 사람이 먹을 거야. 참는 사람이 먹을 거야. 준비. 참아야 된다 했잖아. 옳지. 아니야, 소리 내지 않고 참아. 그렇지. 어이구, 잘 참았어요. 아니야. 잘 참았어요. 네, 정리하세요. 시작. 이겼다. 오, 잘 참았어. 잘 참았어.
All right. Now, we think that maybe it's this video that caused us to get kicked out last time. I'll talk about it, but then we'll watch it at the end. So a lot of our kids have a lot of frustration tolerance problems, and they have frustration tolerance problems with fears, with clothing, with foods, with different situations, with sounds, and they have it across the board, across a wide variety of situations. The problem is when they have such an adverse, such a massively big reaction to those, it causes them to be socially isolated. So our job is always to help them overcome these frustration tolerance problems so that they can engage in everyday life without having these massive reactions for essentially very minute, small things that happen to them in their everyday life. All right, so when we're talking about behavior interventions, then we talked about the reinforcement side. Now we're going to talk about the punishment and extinction side. Remember that all behaviors serve some sort of purpose. There's a reason for a particular behavior to be occurring at any particular time. So when we're talking about extinction, extinction is always about what the function of the behavior is. And so extinction is making sure that the function of the behavior is not achieved. So if the child engages in a problem behavior because they want your attention, your job is to make sure you don't give them the attention they're looking for. Avoid looking at them. Don't talk to them. Don't reprimand them, and definitely don't yell at them. If the child engages in the problem behavior because they want a specific item, your job is to make sure they do not get that item. Your job also is to make sure nobody else in the family is also giving them that item, you know, because our kids are smart. They'll learn like, oh, if you reject me, I know who else to go to. And if they engage in that problem behavior, you have to make sure everyone in the family knows, oh, he cannot have that, because our kids always find that's that one person in the family that's willing to give them that item. Now, if the problem behavior exists because the child doesn't want to do what you told them to do, you have to make them do it. This is called follow through, and you'll hear me talk about follow through a lot. Why? Because it's one of the most important things for everyone to really learn is how to effectively follow through on their instructions to their kid. If you told them to clean up their Legos, you have to then make them clean up their Legos. I don't care how problematic it is. I don't care how many behaviors they show, because at the end of the day, if you told them to do something, they have to do it. Otherwise, they learn they don't have to respect anything that you tell them to do. If you told them it's time to leave the park, you make them leave the park. If it's time for a bath, you make them take a bath. If you told them to complete some schoolwork, they have to complete that schoolwork. So this is an example of follow through.
아니, 따라해. 아니, 아니야. 따라해. 손머리. 그렇지. 박수. 그렇지. 만세. 그렇지. 잘했어. 따라해. 아이치 잘했네. 왜 이러니. 하세요.
All right, so we talked about reinforcement, okay? We talked about extinction. Now we get to punishment, that concept, that word that frightens a lot of people. Just remember that punishment for us doesn't mean the same thing as punishment for most other people. punishment really means that there was an event that occurred in the environment, and that event resulted in a behavior stopping altogether or decreasing. And there are two basic types of punishment, positive and negative. So positive punishment, positive, remember, has nothing to do with good or bad. Positive only means that something got added to the environment that then resulted in the behavior going down. Now, in general, positive punishment is what everybody generally thinks about when they hear the word punishment. The most classic being a spanking is considered positive punishment. What gets added? The spanking, and only if it decreases the behavior is it considered punishment. Other examples of positive punishment include giving you extra work. So if I get mad and I rip up my math worksheet, you give me 2, okay? And if I rip that up, then you give me 4, okay? You're giving me extra work. You're adding in extra work so that over time, it's gonna get rid of this problem behavior. In sports, as well as in like the military, okay, they'll use exercise. Like you came late, now you have to jog a mile. Oh, you did something wrong, so now you have to drop and give me 20 push-ups or sit-ups or some sort of physical activity. All right, so let's talk about negative punishment now. Negative punishment is when we take something away from the environment that results in the behavior decreasing. Negative punishment is also known as response cost, okay? There's a cost to the behaviors we engage in. Now, this is a more modern consequence that most parents utilize, which is, oh, you did engage in a problem behavior that we're trying to get rid of. You lost your tablet, or you lost your TV time, or you lost your toys. That's what negative punishment response cost is that we're taking something away from the child, and that's resulting in that problem behavior going away. Now, for myself, especially, I'm the type of supervisor that likes to do multiple things at the same time. In English, there's a phrase called you kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And what that really means is that I'm going to try to accomplish multiple things by doing one thing. So most of my interventions, really, the child benefits regardless of what happens. So one of my favorite positive punishment procedures is making a child eat something that they don't want to eat when they engage in a problem behavior. Now, most of our kids have very limited diets, and they're considered picky eaters, okay? They only eat either certain colors, they refuse to eat a whole variety of types of food. So they always have this as a problem area for them. And so when you have this difficulty, okay, it's going to impact your level of happiness, because overall, the more things you can enjoy, the happier you are, right? Me, myself, I love eating. And I'll try anything at least one time most of the time, right? Which means that you can literally drop me almost anywhere in the world and I'll be happy eating whatever it is in front of me. You have other people that only like one particular food or one particular thing. You take that away from them and then they're gonna be less happy. So when we have a problem behavior that we're trying to get rid of, the first thing I do is I check in with parents like, oh, is there any foods that your child currently does not like to eat that you will want them to eat? That's going to be healthy for them to consume. And what happens usually is that the tolerance for the food increases. So they get better and they're less and less resistant to eating the food, while at the same time, the problem behavior we're trying to get rid of starts to go down and down and down. Another positive punishment we tend to use is called contingent exercise, okay? What that means is that, oh, when the child engages in a misbehavior, we're gonna make them do some type of physical activity. Now, in the same way, a lot of our kids have gross motor, fine motor, coordination-related challenges. And so I like to identify a deficit that the child has and then work on that deficit whenever the inappropriate problem behavior comes about. So what happens is the same thing that happens when we implement the food. Their problem behavior starts to go down and their coordination, their strength, their ability to perform that exercise we're asking them to do improves. Another procedure that we tend to use is called overcorrection. And overcorrection means that when they engage in a problematic behavior, we're going to make them produce the correct behavior over and over again. Now, this is one example of overcorrection. And this overcorrection I use a lot when the child's already learned to come over when we ask them to. But for whatever reason, that when I asked them to come over, they were too slow. They didn't listen to me. And then that's when I implement this procedure. Come here. Nice. 1. Come here. Good. 2. Come here. Awesome. 3. Come here. Fantastic. 4. Come here. No. Come here. No. Come here. Nice. Come here. Awesome. Come here. Fantastic. 5. Come here. Super. 6. Come here. Oh, 7. Come here. Good. 8. Come here. Bam. 9. Come here. Yay. 10. All done. All right. Now, what you see me doing is I'm still providing feedback for every response that the child is doing. And every time that the child does it correctly, I'm counting up to 10 with the idea that I'm having him do 10 of these. And when he's done with 10, he's done with this task. Another one of my favorite interventions is what we call the calm down chair. And the calm down chair is for the child to cry and to scream for as long as they want. But you have to do it while sitting in this chair. You can't leave the chair. If you're still crying and you're screaming, you just have to sit there. And it doesn't matter how long you have to sit there, you just have to sit there. But you can get out at any time as long as you stop crying.
어려워 여보. 그냥 한번 찍 여기 잡고 긋는 걸로 맞춰 그냥.
All right. So now we're going to talk about some of the common mistakes most parents make when they're using punishment procedures. And most of the time when you're looking into the research, all the negatives you hear about punishment, the negatives arise from the wrong use of punishment or the misuse of punishment. So one of the most common mistakes that parents make is you deliver the punishment when you're mad, when you're hot, okay? They just pissed you off, and that's when you're implementing the punishment. Wrong method of doing so. So the punishment that you select should be pre-selected ahead of time for specific behaviors. It needs to be calculated and deliberate and implemented consistently every single time. Another common mistake that parents make is that they will make threats that they have no intention of following through with. So you just bought very expensive tickets to Disneyland and you paid all this money to fly there, to have a hotel, and you're like, you better listen to me or we're gonna leave this park right now, when you have no intention of leaving that park. The problem with threatening things and not following through is that it takes away your credibility. Why should your child ever listen to you? Because you always say stuff, but you never follow through. So essentially the child learns, oh, this is a crazy person waving a gun that has no bullets in it and they never intend to fire. So should I even respect what they tell me to do? No. Now, this is an error that I think all of us make the mistake of, including me, which is we give our kids way too many chances. When the child engages in a problematic behavior, like, don't make me take it away from you, and you tolerate it and you tolerate it and you tolerate it. And what happens, the child learns that, okay, I have a certain leeway to engage in the bad behavior before you'll finally shut me down. Another error that a lot of people make is piling on one punishment after another punishment after another. So you're like, okay, you know what? This is the child's punishment for hitting, okay? They're gonna lose their tablet. Then they get mad because they lose their tablet, and then they'll spit at you or they'll do other behaviors. And then you're like, oh, for spitting, now you have this punishment. Oh, and for this other behavior, you have this other punishment. No, you can't do that. There should be one punishment. Once you're doing that punishment, it doesn't matter what the child does, you just follow through with that punishment rather than add on, because a lot of times, all of these other behaviors are in response to you implementing that punishment procedure. So if you add one punishment followed by another punishment followed by another punishment, for the child, there's no end to it, which means that, well, why not fight you at my highest level? Because you put me in a corner. There's no way for me to satisfy all of these, so there's no reason for me to listen to you at all. And instead, I would just fight you to the hardest that I can. Don't go to extremes, okay? What that means is never say never to your child. Like, I'm never coming back to this park again, okay? Or I'm never gonna, you're not gonna ever, like, there's always gonna be a chance, okay? So don't go to these extremes in terms of punishment. So be smart, know your child, be reasonable, but very, very calculated about the consequence they're going to incur as a byproduct of the behavior they're going to engage in. The last error that we'll talk about is starting off with low levels of punishment and gradually increasing that because they become less and less effective. So what happens is that, you start at that low level. We all learn to acclimate. We all learn to tolerate low levels, and then you have to increase it. And then we grow to tolerate that. And then eventually what happens is that you have to get to more and more severe consequences that end up not working, rather than at the very beginning, especially for dangerous behaviors, having a hard consequence that's really meaningful to the child and implementing that at that level to just get rid of that behavior, rather than starting at these low levels and building up. All right, so we're back here with this last video, which is showing a desensitization to a fear-based response.
안 무서워. 아니, 안 무서워. 얘들아, 아니, 안 무서워. 앉아. 앉으세요. 앉으세요. 앉아. 그렇지. 엄마가 같이 있잖아. 앉아. 아빠 다리 하고. 아빠 다리. 아빠 다리. 아빠 다리. 그렇지. 예준아. 멀리서. 거기 있어. 멀리서 봐. 괜찮아. 멀리서 봐. 자. 아니야. 멀리서 봐. 자, 봐. 예준. 안 무서워. 봐. 괜찮아. 우와. 안 무섭네? 그냥 멧돼지네? 아니야. 아니야. 괜찮아. 안 무서워. 멧돼지가? 예준아, 안 무서워. 이리 와. 왜 업어줘? 왜 책이 왜 예준아? 무서워? 안 무서워. 엄마랑 같이 보자. 그냥 멧돼지야. 여봐. 멧돼지야. 봐봐. 그냥 멧돼지인데? 멧돼지가 무서워요? 근데 얘자 봐봐. 그냥 멧돼지 괜찮아. 자, 우와. 그냥 멧돼지가 나타났어요. 그렇지. 예준이 잘 봤어. 어이구 잘 봤네. 잘 봤어. 기다려. 멧돼지가 나타났어요. 예준아. 아니야. 아니야. 그물에 갇혔어요. 이거 괜찮아, 엄마. 근데 그날 밤 친구의 꿈에 멧돼지가 나왔어요. 뭐요? 괜찮아. 네. 재봄이 오면 꿈에서 본 멧돼지는 아기를 낳아서 산속에서 행복하게 아기들과 살 거예요. 끝. 그렇지. 잘 읽었어. 예준아, 엄마가 책 읽어줄 거야. 근데 책 읽어줄 건데 기분이 좋다고 일어나고 뛰면 얌전히 앉아서 봐야 되는 거야. 알았어? 일어나면 다시. 알았지? 일어나면 안 읽을 거야. 제목은 고마워요. 그렇지. 고마워요, 엄마. 고양이, 강아지, 호랑이, 코끼리는 도망가서 엄마 생쥐와 아기 생쥐는 집으로 그 사이에 얼렁얼렁 도망갔어요. 엄마 고마워요. 아까야 다음부터 조심하거라. 네 엄마. 엄마 생쥐와 아기 생쥐는 맛있는 치즈를 먹었어요. 끝. 다 읽었어요. 잘했어.
All right. Well, we've come to another end of our lectures here. So hopefully our stream didn't get cut off. We appreciate everyone for taking time out of their day and joining us for our chats. If you like what we do, hit like. If you love what we do, hit subscribe. You have some feedback for us, write it all in the comment section. Good, bad, anything. we're looking to improve all the time. So please help us. It was good to see everyone again, and I'll see everybody next time. Bye-bye.